Philip and Paul Collins. Paul's work is The Hidden Face of Terrorism, which Philip edited, and they both collaborated on the book The Ascendancy of the Scientific Dictatorship, an examination of epistemic autocracy from the 19th to the 21st century. We'll talk about where you can find a lot of their articles, but right now I want to welcome you both to the Grassy Knoll, guys.
Hello, Visigoth.
Thanks for having us.
No problem. In this Part 9, which pretty much was laid out by Philip in places that I'm not really that familiar with, but that one bullet point that we can start off with, and it sounds like a kind of funny statement, and that is the centrality of war to evolution. Now, what's wrong with that?
Well, actually, of course, the whole of the scientific dictatorship has been micromanaged through the historical tide of Darwinism, and which of course dates back to ancient Mesopotamia, to those doctrines of transformism. It's actually a refinement of older occult doctrines, and it's part and parcel of what the elite are trying to implement, which is the transformation of man into God. But part of the of Darwinian evolution is in fact conflict. In his book Evolution and Ethics, Darwinian Sir Arthur Keith wrote, and I'm quoting him now, quote, "If war be the progeny of evolution, and I am convinced that it is, then evolution has gone mad, reaching such a height of ferocity as must frustrate its proper role in the world of life, which is the advancement of her competing units, these being tribes, nations, or races of mankind. There is no way of getting rid of war save one, and that is to rid human nature of the sanctions imposed on it by the law of evolution. Can man render the law of evolution null and void? I have discovered no way that this is at once possible and practicable," unquote. So, war is essential, it's integral and central to the ongoing evolutionary process that the power elite believe man is experiencing, that is gradually lifting him towards apotheosis. It not only helps to cull surplus populations, which thus fulfills the Malthusian precepts of Darwinism, but it also helps tangibly enact the dialectical framework that's intrinsic to evolutionary theory. Evolutionary theory, although many researchers claim that Darwin wasn't a Hegelian, which in all likelihood he wasn't, his framework is nonetheless dialectical. The ongoing evolutionary ascent is facilitated by a thesis, which is one species, and the species comes into conflict with another species, which is the antithesis, and that leads to a synthesis, which is a more highly evolved form of life, which they believe that the ongoing conflict between nations, between men, will eventually result in man's overall transformation into something else, into this post-human form of life, into basically God.
I don't know if you came across this or if you have your own thought about it, but with the centrality of war also, wasn't there a time perhaps when the powers that be realized they could also make a lot of money?
Oh, sure, certainly. I mean, the military-industrial complex certainly has a great deal to gain in terms of profit with war. I mean, the Vietnam War generated just millions and millions of dollars in profit from sending our boys overseas and conducting really what was a fruitless war that did not result in the abatement of communism, but instead more or less the furtherance of communist objectives, and also helped maintain a very politically expedient dialectic between the East and the West.
If I may add in also at this juncture, I think it's important to recognize the fact that the Rothschilds kind of set the precedent with this whole idea of funding both sides and thus maximizing profit. If you go back and you look at the wars of the 19th, just as long as the Rothschild dynasty has been around in Europe, you'll see that both sides were historically funded by the Rothschilds, and this helped them to maximize profit and also to hold these different nations in their debt, and in return for the funding that these countries would receive, the Rothschilds would receive some kind of monopoly as collateral, usually a monopoly over the banking system, and they really laid out the script for this whole idea, and the concept has not been lost on the elites of modernity. They've certainly picked up on what the Rothschilds began and have carried the ball, so to speak.
Well, I guess in the modern period of Europe, there were wars for territory, I guess, and expansion of the realm. But then I guess it's true, and it always seems to come down to men in suits, that with the appearance of the bankers, that's when they really, I guess, realized that warfare could be quite profitable.
Oh yes. Well, when you consider the fact that these nations have to go into debt, and that the debt is usually so high that it's not conceivable them paying it off in a very short period of time, and therefore the bankers are able to ask for certain monopolies over industry, over resources, over the very banking system of that nation as collateral. You can see the promise and just the potential that such a concept holds for those who are in the business of international banking.
You talk about conflict's alchemical function. What do you mean by that?
Well, basically, war again has a more or less alchemical function. Now, alchemy, a common misnomer circulated within academia and amongst others, is that alchemy was its goal was the transmutation of lead into gold. That's not entirely true. That was more or less an ostensible agenda touted by the alchemists of antiquity in order to gain financing and support for their work. What in truth they were really working towards was alchemically transforming man, the transmutation of man into God. And basically, war, as it is seen in an evolutionary context, serves a similar purpose. You have the different races of man basically coming into conflict with each other, the so-called weaker strands being wiped out, and new strands being born as a result of displacement and ongoing displacement of certain populations, and eventually, what the long-term vision for this is that eventually the wars between men will facilitate evolution to such a point that we'll finally make a punctuated leap into being something else, into evolving into our post-human godlike existence.
If there is a goal, if there's something ultimate that's being aimed for, where do you think we are as far as that timeline? I mean, is something almost complete?
Well, it's certainly, Paul and I have been discussing this a lot, and it certainly seems that, like right now, we are on the brink of something enormous. It's difficult to say. The elites' plans, of course, being a conspiracy of men, and men being fallible, seldom ever do their plans really, go completely and totally according to their timelines and their frameworks. But I feel right now, for instance, we have the enormous overextension of the American military. We have our economy is in one of the worst states that's been in a long time. The euro is overtaking the dollar. It would appear that we're just at the precipice, overlooking overlooking the next step. What that step could be, I really don't know. It's frightening though to postulate.
If I could add in at this point, it's important to realize that gradualism has always been a key to the plans of the elites, to the evolutionary script. I'm sure you're familiar with Richard Gardner's article in Foreign Affairs years back in '74, The Hard Road to World Order. Well, Gardner asserted in that article that instant world government was unattainable, and that instead of making a leap into world government, that it would have to be built piecemeal and step by step in a very Fabian socialist way, a slow, gradual way. However, if you look what we've seen as mankind has entered the 21st century, is that this gradualism has almost all but been abandoned, and that the gradual step-by-step approach has turned into a mad dash on the part of the elites. They're no longer patient, and I believe that this is for a number of reasons. I believe that the collapse of the global financial system may be a reason in that they're trying to outrace this. America today faces a debt of $38 trillion, a debt pyramid, and over $100 trillion in highly leveraged derivatives. And given the fact that that globalization has made national economies so interdependent on one another, the fall of one economy could act like a domino effect and bring the rest of the system, the global system, down. And I believe they're trying to outrace this, and so we do see this kind of this speeding up of the plan, and we see right now things being set up in a way on the global chessboard for several more wars to occur over the months and years to come.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned gradualism, because just yesterday, in preparation for writing an article, I took a look back in Quigley's Anglo-American Establishment.
Uh-huh.
And it's just amazing. I mean, how blatant this desire for world order was, and how galvanized he was to the cause, even if he wasn't going to be around, and he knew he wouldn't. And actually, I guess right shortly before his death, and I guess that was around 1902 or so.
Somewhere in there.
Yeah, he said 200 years. 200 years. And I'm amazed. I mean, we're halfway through that as far as he's concerned, and I'm not so sure we're even further down the road than what he had anticipated. But I'll say something else. You might have mentioned Gardner's article to me in Foreign Affairs. That's 1974. Do we remember a month or anything like that, or?
Gosh, I'm lost for a month. I'm just shooting from the hip here. The article is called "The Hard Road to World Order," and if you go to their website, you should be able to pick it up there. But it was a Foreign Affairs article published in one of the months of the year 1974. It is a very important article when looking into the strategy employed by the elite, because basically Gardner makes it clear that the idea of jumping right into world government is not feasible, and therefore we're going to have to follow this kind of Fabian-styled slow, gradual move where national sovereignty is eroded piecemeal, and until one day the whole plan has come about, and people don't even recognize that it has, because it's happened in such a subtle fashion.
It's funny, as much as that is the case, and I want to refer to something in a minute or so. in 1962, in Look magazine, it was the January 16th, 18th, one of those, that around that date, that issue. And in it, there were a number of luminaries and politicians and such that all gave their projection of what they thought things would be like, and I guess that would then be, 1987.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the most glaring quotes was from former Israeli Prime Minister,
Ben Gurion?
Yeah.
Yeah, I know exactly the quote that you're referring to, and how...
Yeah, I mean, he was not projecting anything out of his own imagination or foresight. He knew exactly what was going to happen. And not only he, but also in that article, there's a comment from Claire Booth Luce. And I mean, what she says, I don't know if you ever came across that quote, but that was about as icy as it could get about what they might have to do going back to this population reduction. You know, things don't change. So you're right. Of course you're right. I mean, this gradualism occurring right now. But, you know, it's funny when you go back and you look in works, it's all there.
Yes.
I never saw it.
Yes, and you know, Viz, just because their crystal balls might be a little bit faulty in projecting a date doesn't mean that the specifics that they predict are not the desired end result and the end result that we're headed towards.
Well, you know, the financial situation, which you guys addressed a little while ago, you know, I look at that sometimes and it always seems like it's the cattle prod they nail us with time and time again. And you're right. I mean, I don't know that we're in such perilous financial times right now, but I think like the Damocles sword, I mean, we can see what's over our head. And I don't know about you, and let me ask your opinions. Don't you think that's a card that they could almost play any time they wanted to crash economies?
Absolutely, because when you consider the fact that that we have this managed economic system where the currency can be inflated to astronomical levels, and then you can just put on the brakes really fast, sharply decrease the amount of currency in circulation, and cause at best a recession and at worst a depression. They are in a position to do that whenever they feel comfortable enough to, whenever they've gotten off the markets and have all the money that they desire. Although I kind of get the idea that the economic system might have its own correction, irrespective of their control over the whole thing. It's important to realize that these men are not so all-powerful as perceived by certain researchers, and it's possible that they could actually lose control and the whole thing goes spinning out of their ability to manage. And so there's a question of whether they can survive this thing as much as the common person could.
With what you're regarding your statements about war, you mentioned a number of them, and I guess I'm thinking of the all-timer yet to come. But yeah, I think we'll see constant conflict, and that's going to lead us into we already have talked about that when they hear this part 9. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, but where's I going with this thing? Oh, I know where it is. What do you make? First, I want to ask you, what do you make of Rumsfeld's remarks, I guess, over this weekend, that they're taking more and more troops out of Iraq? Do you think this is a smokescreen? Do you think that this might be an effort he really will start, but that something will stop it and will wind up in Syria or something else for some other reason? Did you hear him say any about that at all?
I heard something to that extent. Let me tell you what I've heard as somebody that's worked on a military base, and we're right next to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base here. And what we understand, what the rumors are around here is that men are being moved out of Europe, and that there's been some base closings there, or that the number of personnel over there are decreasing, and I've heard this from reliable sources that are at the Wright-Patterson Air Force Base and whatnot, and some foreign individuals that live there. And the reason that was given was because America might be prepping for a move into Syria or Iran, and so those personnel would be needed much more over in the Middle East than they would over in Europe. I don't believe that. I believe that Rumsfeld's comments were probably politically motivated to make people believe that progress is being made so that less men are needed over there. But I believe that we're going to actually see a build-up soon, because it just, no matter how it looks like Syria is moving out of Lebanon, I still think that if the elite want a war with Syria, they'll find a reason.
Yeah, it almost looks like, as was the case really with the UN in Iraq. I mean, they wanted basically to give up or whatever, and we wouldn't let them.
That's right.
You know, I mean, it's like, sorry, too late, time up. And I can see the situation happening with Syria. But moving on as far as the war situation goes, now, what is your opinion, or what do you know, about what might be World War III? I mean, a lot of people are out there wanting disarmament, thinking that they're really going to blow the whole world up. I kind of think that they're going to have a controlled nuclear exchange when the time comes to achieve what they want. What do you think? Do you think that that's in the offing?
I believe that that's a very real possibility. That it will be an exchange not between just global terrorism, but with between nation states. That the disarmament's not really the plan at this time. Things have to get elevated to. There has to be an escalation of tension and of trouble and of turbulence and violence before people will be really willing to go along with the whole idea of disarmament, and that means that war must precede any kind of disarmament. I see the enemy being quite possibly in the 21st century Russia. To be more specific, a Russian-Chinese alliance. If you look back to 1984 into the writings of Golitsyn, Anatoly Golitsyn, in his book *The New Lies for Old*, he states that all the political liberalization and democratization that we saw over in the Eastern Bloc and over in Russia was merely cosmetic, that it was simply to lull the West to sleep, and to bring in more capital into the country, to bring in more money so that they could boost the economic system over there, because, as you know, communism never really goes anywhere economically. It always experiences a petrification of the economic system. And everything that Golitsyn predicted, even though he was attacked by establishment christened experts and so-called Sovietologists, everything he predicted happened with accuracy, with frightening accuracy, during the periods between 1989 and 1991. And I believe that they have just been waiting and playing for time, and now they're feeling powerful and comfortable enough to begin making more aggressive moves in the world again. And I believe that that one of those moves will include conflict with the West, with the United States. And we see, of course, Russia and China having these exercises together, these military exercises together, and there have been some mild disagreements over how those exercises would be performed and what the rehearsals would be like, but by and large there still seems to be an alliance forming there, to where the United States and its allies would probably have to face a Chinese-Russian alliance here in the not too far future. That's the enemy I see. I see this Sino-Soviet split, the split in the communist world that happened back during Mao, actually being fixed and mended, and I see them actually becoming more aggressive against the West, which actually may end up playing out to the Western elite's advantage, because the Western elites have always used the specter of communism as a way of galvanizing the people behind them, and they always have offered up their own bizarre form of socialism, of a socialist world government, as a kind of bulwark against a communist encroachment.
And that takes us to another point, again around this idea of the centrality of war to evolution, and that is a report from Iron Mountain that you wanted to touch upon. And my prefatory question would be, do either of you have any problem with the authenticity of this report?
Well, you know, it's very suspicious. I mean, the report basically came to public attention while John Kenneth Galbraith, who was a member of the Council on Foreign Relations, was writing an article in the Washington Post on November 26, 1967, in which he was discussing the report from Iron Mountain, and he said, and I'm quoting him now, "As I would put my personal repute behind the authenticity of this document, so would I testify to the validity of its conclusions. My reservations relate only to the wisdom of releasing it to an obviously unconditioned public," unquote. So essentially, Galbraith, who was writing under the pseudonym of Herschel McLandris, was basically taking issue only with the fact that the study had been made available for public consumption. Galbraith had claimed to have been approached by about participating in the report by some shadowy think tanks, and in I believe it was the February 5th, 1968 issue of the London Times, Galbraith even confessed to being, and I'm quoting him now again, quote, "a member of the conspiracy," unquote. Now, he would later retract his statements, retract his claims the very next day on February 6th, and the London Times, the reporter who was who was writing about it would say, said, Galbraith essentially is basically talking out of both sides of his mouth, because you know, on one hand he tells us that he wrote it, then then he tells us, well, it was written by either Dean Rusk or Mrs. Claire Booth Luce, and then finally the reporter later on countered the retraction and by showing. I'm sorry. By showing that in the interview with in an earlier interview with Galbraith, Galbraith basically confessed that yes, he was part of the effort to put the report together, but he was not the author. So see, the stories keep changing, and Galbraith kept switching his story around and everything. But the authorship of the document, the authorship notwithstanding, it still exhibits a great deal of synchronicity and a great deal of it parallels what's going on now very, very closely. So the document is of great suspicion, and if it were simply a satire, there's still a question as to the amount of foreknowledge that the author would have regarding the prognostications that it makes.
Something I'd like to add in at this juncture, Viz, you've interviewed Joan Vion, correct?
Yes.
Joan Vion has admitted to Stanley Monteith that she has interviewed an alleged member of the Iron Mountain group, and that Iron Mountain member would go on to offer verification of the document's authenticity. And there's something else that people need to consider. Fletcher Prouty, who was the liaison between the Pentagon and the Central Intelligence Agency, heavily quotes from the report from Iron Mountain in his works. And he would not have done so if he did not see the documents as being authentic, or at least having some grain of truth. This was a man that was very high up in government, who had exposure to power politics and into the world of intelligence and whatnot. And he would not have put his weight behind it if he did not find some kind of authenticity to be with the report.
Some more on Iron Mountain in a moment, but right now I want to remind everybody that you're listening to the Grassy Knoll on Dade City Micro Radio. This is part 9 of the series Magicians of Mutability. With us are Paul and Philip Collins. Their 2 books, The Hidden Face of Terrorism and The Ascendancy of the Scientific Dictatorship. Now, if you would, your writings are pretty much in many places on the net these days. I would have to say probably the conspiracyarchive.com.
That's correct.
And biped.com. Is that right? Or
biped.info.
That's right.
Yeah.
Where else can people read some of your articles? And specifically, what is Conspiracy Archive's URL?
It's www.conspiracyarchive.com.
Okay, and then of course biped.info. A lot of stuff there, and
also, people can read an online copy of Paul's article over Abu Ghraib at www.paranoiamagazine.com, and my article over Semiotics will be appearing in an abridged format in the April issue of Paranoia Magazine.
Right, and of course that Abu Ghraib piece was the focus of Paul's 2 parts of the interview back-to-back, and that was Part 7 and Part 8. Getting back to Iron Mountain, this kind of reminds me a bit of the protocols of the Elders of Zion.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, now they attribute everything to the Jews and that, but I look at that document, and if you just take that name out, it's exactly what's happening today. So, regardless, even if it has a murky beginning or authenticity, actually the information is pretty accurate, isn't it?
That's correct. With the protocols, the interesting thing to notice, William Guy Carr, who was involved in Canadian intelligence and whatnot, and wrote the book Pawns in the Game, he recognized the way that things in the protocols, the certain strategies and that had been employed and whatnot, had actually come to pass in the real world. And his belief, what he came to believe, was that it wasn't so much a hoax as it was a forgery, and that whatever group this was that had put together the protocols, they had simply replaced their name with the name of Jew, so that the Jews would become the target if exposure and persecution were to follow. With the Iron Mountain document, no matter how much controversy sprouts up concerning whether it's real or not, people find it pretty undeniable that the contents thereof is exactly the way things have occurred. For instance, one of the things that the report says is that we have to eventually shift gears and find another crisis, and that one possible crisis to get people to back the whole idea of being controlled and concentrating more power in the state. One of the new ideas for doing this would be an environmental meltdown, an environmental crisis. Well, today we just see environmental groups galore, and you can't hardly turn on any mainstream media outlet and not hear about the ozone layer or the
global
greenhouse
warming,
effect.
Yeah.
Yes, global warming, and all. Some even older ideas are now coming back in vogue. I hear about the polar ice caps again, and I haven't heard about the polar ice caps since I was single-digit age, and they're now being spoke about again, and the possibility of them melting and covering the third of the world in water, and drowning out most of the population. So whether or not people believe that these are real, or they're a hoax, or they're a satire, you cannot question the fact that things have gone almost exactly according to the blueprints that are laid out in that report.
Just think of the things that we've been talking about too: finances, warfare, the environment. I mean, really, you can understand. I guess one of the goals is to get people just so, confused and upset that they just shut down. And, of course, then they're much easier to deal with, aren't they?
Oh, yes. The thing about it's important to recognize the fact that shock and trauma and just fear causes the human being to be reduced if it's heaped upon us in large quantities. It causes us to be reduced back to a childlike state. Where we actually go seeking an artificial womb to replace the womb that we were in, while we were the first 9 months, before we were actually born. These traumatizing events and these shocking, horrific doomsday scenarios scare people and make them like clay that can be turned and tossed about, psychologically speaking, and remolded in a way that suits the controllers, so that suits the elites. And that's probably one of the most important aspects, as far as I'm concerned, when looking at elite criminality and looking at conspiratorial history, is this idea of social engineering, the idea of changing people's social values by different subtle psychological means. And it's like you said, when people are hearing about the ozone layer breaking down and skin cancer rising, astronomically, and hear about the planet warming up, and the possibility that this warming is what caused the tsunami and over in the Asian countries. It has a tendency to frighten them into a state where they will trade off their freedom for security, and they'll basically seek out another daddy, another father. In this case, the father that they are offered by the elite is the state.
Well, one of the objectives being accomplished by gradualism, if you will, I can see in the education system and how that's being morphed to probably, I understand that there's always a reason and a real reason. But you have a lot of latchkey kids, I understand that, and the school's extended its day so that they can watch over them. But what I'm seeing also at the end of this road is a usurpation of parental rights by the education system tied into the state.
That's correct.
And I mean state with a capital S.
That's right. That's correct. That's the whole reason for the extension of the day, like you were saying. A matter of fact, I remember that by the tail end of my education, I remember that the day ended around 12 to 1 noon, but by the end of my days in public education, I wasn't getting out of school until around 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And it's questionable whether or not any kind of real meaningful bond can be formed between parents and their children when given this kind of environment. And that's a bad thing when you consider the fact that the family is the one that cultivates individuality in the person. It's not the state. The state cannot cultivate individuality. The state can only cultivate an idea of the collective.
Well, that's a really excellent point, because one of the things I see in education, and if I had to nail one thing, I would say that the education system is about the death of the individual. which was central to a constitutional republic, which begot us a Bill of Rights for the individual. That's got to come to an end in order to bring about this collectivism and relying on mommy state.
That's correct.
Right. One other thing, if we could, real quick, also, and I don't know we can dispense with this topic too quickly, but I want to get into also what we see as rampant SSRI consumption by Americans, starting off as early. Sometimes I've been here in second grade. These kids are on mood elevators and such. Now, this is also part of the whole idea of the scientific dictatorship, and it does hearken somewhat Aldous Huxley. But you've witnessed this as well. Do you agree that what we've got in our hands right now also is an epidemic of a deliberate making?
I agree with that statement. I find that it's a deliberate narcotization of these children through different social programs. And if you'll look in some of these programs, the only way you're going to receive funding for the children and receive the money for your child is if you accept the idea of placing them on one of these mood elevating drugs or something that supposedly causes them to be able to have longer attention spans.
It's also interesting because the state will criminalize certain psychotropic drugs and narcotics, and basically criminalize their usage, so much so that you have just regular everyday addicts, people who have a problem with addictions thrown behind bars, which I fail to see how that corrects the problem that they have, because it certainly doesn't help them with their addictions. In fact, probably behind bars they'll develop a few more. But meanwhile, they'll encourage the use of psychotropic drugs in other venues and in other ways. For instance, in schools, they encourage the use of Zoloft. I know of school counselors that actually prescribe Zoloft for their students. You also see its use encouraged in medicine. And I mean, the whole drug-based medical science establishment, as we're starting to see, has basically proven to be an absolute failure. People are experiencing more success using natural means and homeopathic remedies than they are using these drug-based methods. And I believe that part and parcel of this, is an occult agenda, because, for instance, you take the word from which we derive pharmaceutical from, pharmakia, in the original Hebrew, that meant sorcery. And again, it harkens back to this alchemical transformation of man. Aldous Huxley, whose book, The Doors of Perception, acted as one of the official Bibles for the drug culture that blossomed during the 60s. He was a member of a organization, a cult called the Children of the Sun, which was peopled largely by the progeny of Round Table members. And he was also basically the protege of Aleister Crowley, who, of course, his occult ties and connections are just voluminous. And in every case, you see drugs coming to the fore in these occult practices. In fact, in Aleister Crowley's book, The Diary of a Drug Fiend, which was a fictionalized account of his experimentation with narcotics and LSD, he basically said, well, through the use of drugs, we achieved a new plane of enlightenment, and he refers to it as, and I quote now, the evolution, as a higher plane of evolution. So again, you see the centrality of not only war but of narcotics to this whole evolutionary script, to the whole doctrine of transformism to which the elite adhere.
Also, I was in an interview with Dr. William Deagle, who talked about what the elite might be looking toward as far as a futuristic human being. Also, Andrea Soros and I have been in conversation. She was on the show. And what it revolved around is really, don't the elites want a minimum amount of human beings, or even hybrids perhaps, like cyborgs, and a type of human being that wouldn't need as much maintenance, less nutrition, less sleep? Do you see that at all in Huxley's works or others?
Well, it's interesting because Julian Huxley, Aldous' brother, wrote prolifically on on eugenics and on UNESCO's role in promulgating eugenics, and on, of course, this vague chimerical number of ideally manageable people. It's funny because the Malthusian ideologues who populate the ruling classes, various machinations, they never do really come to a complete consensus on what would be manageable and everything. I mean, they never have decided what the ceiling was, and they've never really come up with a specific figure. They can't tell us what the ideal population for the Earth would be, and so of course they will tout all sorts of little figures like, well, we need to get rid of this million of people or this billion of people. We need to lose about 3/4 of the people and everything. But I mean, it's never been accurate, never been concise, never been printed in concrete. Which basically to me suggests that they're really shooting in the dark. It's almost as though it's become like a superstition, a little superstitious religion of theirs. I mean, the whole thing has a religious element to it, as is evidenced by the Georgia Guidestones. I mean, you look at that and semiotically, I mean, it's an icon because it has an iconic similarity to the to Stonehenge, and semiotically it communicates a message of sacrifice, and I believe that's ultimately what they're looking at is sacrificing so many millions of people in hopes of maintaining a societal order that in which they remain in the top of the hierarchy, and everybody else remains on the bottom.
I think it would be important also to add at this point. You bring up through drugs, through genetic manipulation, coming up with a class of humans that are different, with a class of beings. Actually, the human is probably the incorrect term for it. That is different from the rest of us. The transhumanists have this term that they tout known as the gen-rich class, which is a class of people that through all these different forms of technological augmentation have become different, have moved beyond being human and into this post-human stage. And their writings concerning this gen-rich class suggest a class that is privileged, that is the elite, and then the rest of us that have no such augmentation, that are just everyday common human beings, will be considered lessers. The best way to look at it, I think, would be to go back to H.G. Wells with his writings, his book, The Time Machine, with the Eloi and the I believe they were called Morlocks, right. and one race was predatory and was basically feeding off of the other race. This is the situation that we would get under the transhumanist vision, and this is the what we're precisely moving towards at this very point in time. Something I'd like to also point out about those Georgia Guidestones, Michael Corbin, my good friend that does the radio show A Closer Look, has spoke to me numerous times about it, and he has a saying that he falls back on whenever he's speaking about those Guidestones. He's like, you look at the number that they have, which I can't recall offhand what's the number in terms of population that they find acceptable written on these Guidestones, and he says, and Michael says, now you do the math and all. Take the number that they have there as a reasonable number, subtract it from the current population, and you will find that more than half of humanity is gone, is exterminated, eliminated, done away with somehow. They're rather, in a very sinister way, they're vague on how they're going to get rid of all these people, which leaves you to only guess. So what we have is this small, manageable population that's small enough to where uprisings or dissent could never become a real factor, and then with the drugs being applied into people, we have a group that is manageable and has docility injected into its ranks, so that a person that's been successfully narcotized can't really put forward any kind of meaningful activism on the grassroots level at all. I mean, you look at the '60s counterculture movement, which was supposed to be against the establishment, and it actually ended up ultimately helping the establishment and helping them concentrate power. And I see the reason behind that in part because of the heavy use of drugs, in particular LSD, which was disseminated amongst the counterculture through the Central Intelligence Agency. I see the same kind of situations shaping up here. A privileged class made so by nanotechnology, by different forms of technological augmentation, and then the rest of us who are kept dumbed down, numbed through drugs, through entertainment, through culture, and who have been basically picked off until we're barely at any kind of level where dissent or protest would be meaningful.
Well, again. And I look at mainstream media as being key to this. I think it's an instrumental tool that the elites needed, and that is, you get brainwashed so subtly. I'm even like looking now at like the morning shows before the Today Show. Everybody has their own local network who does their little yada yada, from 5 to whatever 7. And I sit there sometimes and I look at this, and all I'm hearing is research says, this laboratory says. And it's like, who says they say? You know what I mean? Or it's this constant working on you that this is bad, then the next day this is good. And like you said, the 60s, of which I was a part of, unfortunately, I was used. And you come to find out that the Jesuitical dictum, often also found in 1984, it's true. Black is white, white is black. War is peace, peace is war. If they tell you there's the agenda, you can pretty much bet they want the opposite.
That's right, and it's very interesting too that they tout the whole thing in euphemisms and in altruistic maxims, right. But I mean, really, once you begin to peel away the euphemisms, and once you begin to peel away these little slogans. There's no way that this agenda could be confused or concealed, by any sort of benevolent little lovey-dovey talk. We're talking about a hierarchical, stratified society controlled through drugs, controlled through war, and basically the end of humanity, the end of the human race. As our species allegedly makes this evolutionary leap into being something else.
Well,
So
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh no. Essentially, what people have to remember is when you hear about the research and the statistics and everything, statistics and ethnographic studies and demographic studies are just that. They're studies and examinations, but they are not conclusive. They take segments of the population. The data is very selective, and again, it returns to this idea, of a scientific dictatorship. The core doctrine of which is scientism, the bestowal of absolute epistemological primacy upon science, and science. While it is a valuable tool to mankind, is just a finite system of quantification. And you're never going to be able to reduce a complex creature like man, which was made in the image of God, to a quantifiable entity. It can't be done. If you do, you're going to wind up precluding transcendent concepts such as the soul, the spirit, human dignity and freedom. All these things will be precluded according to the measuring stick of science. And so again, people have to realize that the measuring stick is limited, and that a lot of important data is being fudged or overlooked.
We only have about 3 minutes left, and I like to end on this and then pick up in our last part with this. And we didn't talk about it as far as an outline goes, but this is what has struck me over the last few days. We have Terri Schiavo's tube removed. We have the state government and the federal government and Bush apparently wanting to get involved. Now, I've had the lawyer for Terri Schiavo on. I've had Terry's brother on. And not only do we have that situation, but we had, unfortunately, the death of a young girl a couple of counties north of us at the hands of a pedophile. But when I hear all the rhetoric that comes out around these two issues, and I fear that what we're seeing is a plea, even though it seems legitimate, for more government intervention. In other words, if you move anywhere, and I think this is what's going to happen sooner or later, if I move back up to New York, I'm going to have to register that I'm moving. Do you know what I'm saying? Now, I understand you have to register pedophiles. That's okay, right? But it's almost like, well, how are they going to do that unless they make everybody register? Because, if it's not mandatory, you can still slip through the cracks.
You're on a slippery slope, and that's the problem, is that a well-meaning issue such as the Terri Schiavo case, or the case that you're talking about, I believe it's the individual's name in that case was Cooey, and he,
right.
Am I correct?
Yes, that is correct. That was a perp, yes.
The problem is that the solutions that can be put forward to these problems can be just as bad as the problems that they sought to solve, and I don't think that's a mistake on the part of the elites that put forward these so-called solutions. They know that the end result of their solutions is a concentration of state power, and they wouldn't have it any other way. The state is an entity that can be controlled, and they by the elite.
Segment of the Grassy Knoll. This is being recorded on February 20th, 2005. We have with us Philip D. Collins coming back again to give us another installment of the multi-part series entitled Magicians of Mutability. Both Philip and his brother Paul co-authored the book The Ascendancy of the Scientific Dictatorship, an examination of epistemic autocracy from the 19th to the 21st century. They also collaborated on another book, Philip as the editor, Paul as the author, that's titled The Hidden Face of Terrorism. You'll find many of their articles up on biped.info, and that is, quote, the official website of Darwinian Descent and Conspiracy Archive. And I want to welcome you back, Philip, to the Grassy Knoll. Thanks for being with us again.
Thanks for having me back.
What I'd like to do is, before we go into this fourth segment, maybe clean up a little old business, if you will. I got some questions for you from a listener.
Sure.
Also, I want to know, are there any new articles that are forthcoming from you or Paul?
Currently, I'm working on a new article which will trace the semiotic lineage of the truncated pyramid and all-seeing eye from its first appearance on the dollar bill to its reappearance and resurgence today with the Total Information, or now Terrorist Information Awareness Program.
Yeah, that was actually, I think they may have changed that, but wasn't that the logo?
Yes, as a matter of fact, yes, it was the logo, and I find it especially interesting that it should experience a resurgence today under an administration that's pervaded by neoconservatism, which qualifies as a variant of technocracy, and of course, when it made its appearance on our currency, that was under FDR's administration, which was an administration that initially received the sanction of the technocratic movement as well. So I think there's a continuity of thought there.
This isn't really that important. If you want to give your opinion or address this, by all means. But I had read and really don't have a problem believing that design was of the truncated pyramid and the all-seeing eye was given to Thomas Jefferson.
Yeah, there's been reports that may have been the case, and its sources are a bit etchy and everything. They're a little bit foggy, but then again, you're always going to have a certain degree of fogginess on the origin of these these symbols and from whence they came. Of course, deciphering their meaning though is an entirely different matter. And when you begin to pick up on the fact that there's a design in there, then that's when the symbol is especially important.
I have to tell you though, one of the best icebreakers there is for talking to people about what's going on who have no idea as of yet, and that is to take a dollar bill and go over it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. There's a whole smorgasbord of things there. I mean, just on one side alone, it's replete with symbols, with codes and what have you, and all of it, semiotically, again, it gesticulates towards something bigger, and I don't think that they would have, had it placed on the dollar bill unless it was supposed to infer something greater and of a grander scale.
Well, what I think is probably the most minute symbol on the dollar bill, but the one that I think is the most heinous. Are you familiar with that little owl?
Yes, the little owl, yeah.
Going back to Moloch. I mean, what a... Oof.
I recently read an article which may have placed the Moloch, the identity of Moloch in question, but nonetheless places the owl in the trajectory of certain occult beliefs. I'm not. The court's still out on my end with that, but the simple fact that the owl has been incorporated as part of the semiology and groups that have practiced child sacrifice all the way back to antiquity, that remains a permanent fixture, of that is part of the legacy of that symbol, and for it to be there on the dollar bill is truly disturbing.
Yeah, and a lot of people just shrug their shoulders and they wonder why. But I'll tell you what, even as kids we wondered why, but we just blew it off because you don't think of anything beyond just an image on a piece of paper.
Sure. Yeah. And that's one of the reasons why semiotics is so important. I mean, because semiotics it can't be qualified as the derisive stigma of quote unquote conspiracy theory. Semiotics began initially as just the study of human communication, and it approaches these symbols from a purely non-conspiratorial point of view, but nonetheless derive the same meaning. So, every symbol, everything that comprises human communication has meaning. And so, just to simply shrug it off
and think, well, it's just a picture and they put it there. It's not the wisest thing to do.
Going back to the book that you and Paul co-wrote, what does the term epistemic autocracy mean? What was the concept behind that?
Certainly. Epistemic derived, of course, from the Greek root episteme, which means knowledge or knowing. And what we basically have today is an autocracy of the knowable. Basically, the elite want to enthrone one epistemology, one means of knowing. It's been largely a materialistic one. It's been largely premised upon metaphysical naturalism, and so that is the autocracy of the epistemic that we're witnessing. One knowledge, one science. Science also being derivative of the Latin root scientia, which also means knowing. So basically, the idea is that we only know what we know because they know it, and they get to tell us what we know and what we do not know.
Also, for the series that we're doing with you and Paul, The Magicians of Mutability, what were you hoping to embrace with that title?
Well, basically, the title it basically encapsulates the theme of mankind as an inherently mutable species. This is what the ruling class elite believe. Their doctrine is basically a doctrine of emergent deity, that humanity is in the process of becoming. The doctrine is also known as transformism, where we experience periods of transformation, and because we're inherently mutable, because we have this proclivity towards mutability, the elite feel it's their duty to facilitate our transformation, our mutation into something else. And the final ends of this alchemical mandate is the transmutation of humanity into a post-human creature, a creature that's no longer human, but is instead God. And you have numerous permutations of this belief throughout the 19th century and well into the 20th century. You have it with Hegel's Weltgeist. You have it with the many evolutionary theories that preceded Darwin, and then of course Darwinism that acted as the final conduit or transmission belt for the doctrine of transformism into the 20th and now well into the 21st century.
The first article I read from you, and the one that moved me to get in touch with you, the semiotic piece on 9/11, is the basis for an email I received. And if you don't mind,
sure,
I'll read you the comment and I'll ask you the questions. And if it's not that you have to speak to this, but I think that the emailer was interested in your opinion, whatever that should be.
Sure.
All right. The comment is the foreshadowing, conditioning, and psychopolitical programming for 9/11 were clearly evident in the mass media culture as well as in documents such as the Project for a New American Century, and even earlier quotes from such arch criminals as Kissinger. Tell me how you really feel. Anyway, go get him. Anyway, question 1. Philip, are you aware of other sources or documents that might represent likely, quote, screenplays for future, quote, engineered terrorist or other conditioning events?
Absolutely. Now, as for screenplays that would pretty much draw out the paradigmatic template for other terrorist events, I'd have to examine that a little further. But I do know that there are designs inherent, for instance, in the film 2001: Space Odyssey, which basically is the elites, the ruling class religion encapsulated within one film. That film basically reveals the designs that they hold for humanity, particularly with the appearance of the monolith.
which of course appears intermittently through the film, and interestingly enough, appeared in Magnuson Park on 2001. Nobody knows there was a monolith or a replica of the monolith found in Magnuson Park, and of course that very same year 9/11 took place. And so what the monolith semiotically gesticulates towards, what it's a signpost for, is the next step in human evolution, the next quantum leap that the elite wish to take us on. And essentially now we have America's further transmogrification into a technocratic dictatorship, a scientific dictatorship, and we have humanity on its way towards more wars. And of course, according to their doctrine of transformism, wars further promulgate evolution, and into a brand new century of humanity continuing its evolutionary ascent towards apotheosis. So yes, I definitely see paradigmatic templates in other narratives.
And question number 2, speaking of monoliths of sorts, also I would like to hear your opinion on the origin and nature of the infamous Georgia Guidestones.
You know, the Georgia Guidestones are very, very interesting, because a lot of people have speculated as to where they come from and who made them. What is very interesting about the Georgia Guidestones is the fact that it reveals that inextricably linked with Malthusian depopulation agendas is a religious agenda as well, and the very use of the monolith, or I'm sorry, of the design from the
Guidestones.
Yeah, for the Guidestones. It's derivative of course the Druid
the Stonehenge.
Yeah, Stonehenge.
Mm-hmm. Right.
The Druid designs it infers semiotically sacrifice, and so essentially we have again the message that's being made is one of occult ritual, of sacrifice, and so the inference is that humanity, in order to maintain population stability, will have to make sacrifices, and will have to make these sacrifices in the name of a religious doctrine. And again, that doctrine, I personally believe, is a doctrine of transformism that basically holds that man is on his way to becoming something else, and of course, on his way to becoming something else, we're breeding people like pigs, and some pigs are more equal than others, to draw the Orwellian inference.
I have a question for you, because
Sure.
in reading especially this last article that I came upon, and I know it's been around a while, well, I was thinking about all this monolith and megalith, and I started to think that really this is a continuation and a furtherance, whether it's a wink or a serious attempt by the Illuminati to continue with the whole idea of the Tower of Babel and the unification, or in this case I think you would say the reunification of all mankind with a capital M.
Sure. It would certainly appear so. First off, you have definitely inherent in their beliefs this monistic preoccupation with oneness. It's a doctrine of monism, which basically is a cosmological view that all things are one, and that means one, basically for them, one nation, which would be nation Earth, means one world religion, and it means one world economic system. But another thing that it means is one humanity, one man with a capital M, like you said, and
for instance, if you read Wilmshurst's book, W.L. Wilmshurst, a Masonic scholar, in it he basically says, well, that the tradition of Freemasonry is also the tradition of what he calls, quote unquote, the collective soul, and that humanity at one time was a singularity, and that singularity experienced a diaspora, and human consciousness became individuated. Basically, you and I became our own entities unto ourselves, and that constituted a fall. So you see already parallels between parallels and distortions of the Eden account from Genesis, and of course, with this fall came what Wilmshurst calls the progressive densification of the material body and corresponding darkening of the mind and atrophy of spiritual consciousness. But at any rate, now he as other higher initiate Masons believe, and as the ruling class believes, we are on our way back from being this plurality towards being a singularity again. And you find this belief intrinsic in Big Bang cosmology, because Big Bang cosmology follows the same framework. We began as a singularity. The singularity, for no good reason, blows up, and now everything is a plurality. And possibly, I wouldn't be surprised if you saw contemporary science moving back towards the singularity again, and I believe we have with the transhumanist movement and convergent technologies projects.
And also all the religions that are popping up right now, most prominently, I guess, the Kabbalah.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
OTO, which we'll have Craig Heimbeckner on to talk about in his book, Blood on the Altar. But all of this involves with ascendancy of the soul, that they can be a God.
Exactly, absolutely. Well, Ray Kurzweil, a very prominent computer entrepreneur, also studies artificial intelligence. He believes, I believe it was in the book Age of Spiritual Machines, he believes that humanity can achieve immortality, technological immortality, by downloading his consciousness into cyberspace. And so you have this belief in cyber survival, and that essentially we can become gods, occupying both cyberspace and the corporeal vessels of our bodies, and continuing on and on and on. And you have sci-fi predictive programming pieces of literature that have also basically prophesied this. I say prophesied in quotes, with, for instance, Arthur C. Clarke's The City and the Stars, which also presents a scenario for the digital transformation of man. And also at the Denver University, you have this mural that's entitled Digital Transformation, and presents a goddess with her hands outstretched, and issuing forth from both hands is the double helix of DNA for humanity, and as it continues to ascend into the heavens, it begins to transform into ones and zeros. So again, you have this belief that we're headed towards a plurality, and something like a hive mind, I would call it.
Well, this scientific dictatorship, which was coined, not that he's the originator of it, but it would seem he was the one who made it most popular, and that's Huxley.
Certainly.
Mentioning it in Brave New World Revisited, and also in that Berkeley speech called The Ultimate Revolution. But when Paul was on the last time, in part 3, he kind of laid out a continuum of the generations, if you will, that have sought this very goal, which is scientific dictatorship. And in it, I'm going to just paraphrase, he had mentioned Cush, to Nimrod, to the Canaanites, to the Phoenicians, to the Venetian oligarchy. And we didn't go on beyond that, but within that and beyond that, you also would say that Darwin played a role in this whole mindset, did he not?
Absolutely. Well, with the transplantation of the Venetian oligarchy in Britain, you have also the emergence of the Rosicrucians and the Freemasons. Some scholars have said that those two orders rose concurrently. I've read other sources that say that one created the other. Whatever the case may be, both have very, very closely aligned doctrines, and both of those secret societies had been closely aligned. Well, at any rate, basically in 1662, under a royal warrant of Charles II, an organization was that was ostensibly devoted to the scientific research and the broadening of human knowledge was formed, known as the British Royal Society. But we come to find out that virtually all of its founding members were Freemasons. Freemasonry basically was pretty much the progenitor of the British Royal Society, and I've read elsewhere that the British Royal Society was considered an auxiliary organization to the Freemasonic Lodge. But at any rate, all of its founding members were Freemasons, and basically T.H. Huxley, who was one of the members of the British Royal Society, became what was known as the bulldog, Charles Darwin's bulldog, and the official apologist for Darwinian evolution. But Darwinian evolution really was derivative of earlier precursory forms of evolutionary theory. Before that, you had Erasmus Darwin, who was Charles's grandfather, and also a Freemason, who had written the book Zoonomia, which basically delineated his evolutionary framework. And before him, several years before him, you have John Locke, yet another Freemason and a member of the British Royal Society, who refined the Hindu doctrine of reincarnation within the context of metaphysical naturalism to develop a theory of evolution. So this goes back quite a ways, but it was with Charles that the British Royal Society finally decided to proceed with a campaign of public indoctrination into evolutionary thought.
Well, I found it interesting in a book that was, the topic of which was drug politics, written by a former U.S. ambassador to Peru, David C. Jordan. And with this whole drug thing, and I believe, I got to get this off my tongue correctly, he called it the narco-statistician of global economy. But in it, he traced back to these very same characters, and that would be obviously not only Darwin, but Galton and T.H. Huxley and Wells and the rest
Absolutely.
of them. You know, and I mean, I just found it interesting that he would go and kind of take a little sidebar digression and get involved in this, and that really tells me a lot if he's willing to devote a number of pages to that whole mindset.
Certainly.
And go ahead.
It's interesting that you would bring up the topic of drugs, particularly in conjunction with evolution, because other occultists, you mentioned Aleister Crowley's OTO earlier,
right.
Other occultists have also considered drug usage as integral to the evolutionary process. Aleister Crowley wrote in Diary of a Drug Fiend, and I'm quoting him now. He said, "We obtained the ineffable assurances of the existence of a spiritual energy that worked its wondrous will in ways too strange for the heart of man to understand until the time should be right. we had attained a higher state of evolution, and unquote. And so basically you can see where it basically comes back into play with evolutionary theory. And the reason I believe that is because, of course, reincarnation is the spiritual counterpart of evolution. But you have in those Eastern religions also a proclivity towards drug use, and what many folks who have done narcotics or basically promote its use, such as Aldous Huxley with his book The Doors of Perception, have claimed is that it allows us to transcend the sensory distortions that we're so susceptible to in our cognizant frame of minds, and begin to join with what they call the absolute, which I would consider just another appellation for the Masonic collective soul, or the group soul, or the oversoul. And it's interesting because during the 60s we witnessed a promulgation of narcotics and an enormous narcotization effort on behalf of the CIA, which of course again has currents running into secret societies and occult characters.
Well, it seemed to me, and maybe you know something about this, that what I've read, it's almost as if Charles Darwin, kind of was a prop up. In other words, the powers that be wanted this to happen, and of course what he came out with went back to Erasmus was the grandfather, right? Right. And so he comes out with this, but I don't know. I mean, it's been intimated that he wasn't all that remarkable.
Yeah, he was. Of course, he flunked out of medical school. He had only really a degree in theology, and he was a relatively shy man. He was more of a recluse, and in fact, that was one of the reasons why T.H. Huxley had to pick up the banner for him. T.H. Huxley would basically go out and act as the battering ram against all those who would speak against Charles Darwin. And for the most part, Charles Darwin, even there are sources that suggest that he himself was pretty much doubtful of his own theory, especially later in life. It's also interesting to note that the character with which his theory of evolution finds part of its origins, Erasmus Darwin, his grandfather, was the founding member of what was known as the Lunar Society, and the Lunar Society was basically acted as a precursor to the British Royal Society. It was also intimately involved in subversive activities like the French Revolution. Erasmus Darwin himself had pledged his support to the radical Jacobins. So, all this time you have Charles Darwin, who's not necessarily a person of great scientific veracity, but you have all these ominous interests behind him and backing him, which for me suggests that the promulgation of Darwinism was largely part of a socio-cultural project as well.
You're listening to The Grassy Knoll with Viz and Philip D. Collins, who along with his brother Paul have written The Ascendancy of the Scientific Dictatorship, an examination of epistemic autocracy from the 19th to the 21st century. Articles by the Collins can be read on the web, various venues. If you don't feel like doing a Google or a dogpile search, then go ahead out to biped.info. You'll find a number of them there. I'll have 3 up on my website by the time you folks are listening to this. Going back to Darwinianism, and I have to tell you, it was interesting in Edwin Black's book, War Against the Weak. He recounts an exchange between Galton and H.G. Wells. This gives you an idea where H.G. Wells' head is at.
Absolutely.
I don't know if we mentioned this, but Galton was chided for basically stopping at selective breeding when Wells wanted population reduction and other things.
Yeah. H.G. Wells wanted to take it much, much further.
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking of these characters. They look like such, gentle old men.
Yeah.
And they've got the heart of an ice chest.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you look at these guys, and they look like they look like your prototypical grandpa, and yet you have them saying things like with H.G. Wells saying things like the men of the New Republic wouldn't be squeamish. They wouldn't have any problem inflicting pain and using whatever means necessary to maintain their dominance. And another closely aligned individual in that basic orbit is Bertrand Russell, who basically said, well, it may become desirable to spread another black plague to decimate world population. And in fact, I'm loosely paraphrasing him now. He said, well, the state of affairs in that world would be somewhat miserable, but as he puts it, what of it? So yeah, not exactly your portrait of a nice old man.
Oh yeah, I mean, and that's where I was going to. So it was rich that you would mention Russell, because in the epilogue of his book, The Intelligent Women's Guide to Socialism, I mean, in the back it says, if you don't like socialism, we can kill you.
Yeah,
we can execute you in a kindly manner. It's like an oxymoron.
Yeah, he basically says, that socialism is basically a form of coercive care, and we'll let the state care for you, and as long as you are a vital asset to the state, we'll keep you around, but at such point of which you become obsolete, you can be basically euthanized. And it's interesting that you bring up the socialism angle, because and I don't think any scholar would argue this, Darwinism was integral to the promulgation of socialism, both in its variants of fascism and communism.
Good point. And I'll tell you what, there's a local Tampa lawyer who is extremely, extremely anti-socialistic. Not that we all aren't, but he has a website. I believe it's Rex Curry, CURRY.net. And I mean, that's devoted to the socialistic symbolism and also the realities that have infiltrated the lives of United States citizens. But what he made a good point about, and I think we all tend to forget this, or most of us do, and that is when you think about the Nazi regime, or the Great Purging by Stalin and Mao, these are all from a government concept called socialism.
Absolutely.
So everybody thinks of socialism as being benign and nice, but all these characters, all these movements, all this killing was construed under the banner of socialism.
Absolutely. Not to mention, just in economic practice, socialism qualifies as essentially as state-sanctioned theft. I mean, I fail to see where the confiscation of my wealth or your wealth or anybody else's income is supposed to result in the greater good. I mean, paradoxically, that calls for an infringement on my right to prosper. And I think other philosophers have made a great argument against this. For instance, Ayn Rand. Now, I don't necessarily agree with everything that Ayn Rand says, but I mean, she basically laid it bare and everything. It's paradoxical indeed, because on one hand, they talk freedom and equality, but then we realize, well, equality doesn't always equate to freedom, and it's everybody's right to be unequal, and that some people are more productive than others. Now, I'm not meaning to assert that there are people who are
useless or worthless in the greater schemes of things, but we all have different gifts, different talents, and different abilities. And so we direct those talents and abilities towards different, different directives. And what socialism basically does is it sterilizes that uniqueness, because now everybody's the same, everybody's equal, and thus everybody's efforts must be directed towards the maintenance of the state, which of course they hold continually. This state will fade away, it'll wither away, but that never happens. I mean, no state that is enshrined and enthroned with such power as socialism, as that is bestowed upon it by socialism, will ever wither away.
No, and I'll tell you what's happening, what I'm seeing at the university level. There are students who actually think that socialism is good because they've been frightened into what they see as the discrepancy between big-time winners and big-time losers in the capitalist system. And, I think that dichotomy has been kind of blown out of proportion.
Absolutely.
But you know what? I'll tell you. I don't think anything that happens on TV is like spontaneous. Now, when I see Trump out there with "You're fired," here's yet another show on TV,
right?
Where there's this survival of the fittest mentality.
Absolutely.
And they're just absolutely, awful in jettisoning people off the shows, and that goes with all those survival series too on Fox.
Yeah, well, basically those reality shows are social Darwinian in nature. I mean, they're 100%. And what kills me about those is that most of the time they're not even based on meritocracy. They're not based on the individual merit of the contestants, of whoever's playing. It's based on who can lie and cheat the most.
And also with this that we see on TV and all these survival shows, and I would call them elimination shows to include, dates and all this other stuff.
Right.
What strikes me is the cruelty and the coldness of those who win. It's like we've always had bad losers, but now we got bad winners.
Oh yeah, absolutely. In fact, that's an excellent point. I mean, and so the end result is, there used to be a day and an age when we would look to those who had quote unquote succeeded and decide to use them as an example to follow and everything. And many of the people who did in fact succeed and were the original entrepreneurs were men of great moral stature, men and women who had well-defined moral sensibilities. Now that whole paradigmatic template has been inverted, and now it's like the anti-hero has become the hero. All of a sudden now the villain has become that to which we strive after.
Right. Going back to some of the points you made in an outline that you shared at the very beginning of this series, do you want to talk further about Darwinian evolution theory and its relation to the Nazis and to communism?
Absolutely, sure. Well, Darwinism shares with both fascism and communism, both Marx and Hitler, shares a dialectical framework. There's a Hegelian framework inherent to Darwinism. It works something like this: the species, which is the thesis, comes into conflict with nature, which is the antithesis, and basically the conflict of those gives rise to a synthesis, which is a brand new evolutionary refined creature, a new rise in the species, and this dialectical framework was also evident in Marxism, which you had basically the proletariat versus the bourgeoisie synthesizing in a classless utopia. It's also evident in a racial context, and probably even closer to the original Darwinian context in Hitler's Nazi Germany, because you have the Jews versus the German people, So this thesis and antithesis come into conflict, and they synthesize, giving rise to a brand new race, which, of course, Hitler thought would basically be the Aryan. But the close ties between communism and Darwinism are so numerous that it's almost impossible to enumerate them all. But the most significant ones I find are, for instance, in a letter written by Frederick Engels to Marx in December of 1859, he wrote, quote, "Darwin, whom I am just reading, is splendid," unquote. And Marx responded with, quote, "Although it is developed in the crude English style, this is the book which contains the basis in natural history for our view," unquote. So you have already the scientific foundation for socialism in Darwinism. And of course, eventually, fascism and communism and all the variants of socialism upon which were premised or premised themselves upon Darwinism would eventually start duking it out between each other. Eventually, they would start feuding between each other, and I believe that with the 20th century, we're witnessing the synthesis. We've witnessed the synthesis of the two, and with the 21st century, we're seeing that give rise to something new. With globalization and with basically the corporate Marxism of the World Bank and the IMF and institutions like that, which also employ Darwinian measures of population control and what have you by manipulating national economies and basically dismantling the industrial infrastructure of nations and calling off what they would consider undesirable populations.
And I think what we're seeing presently is another phase being unfolded that leads to a population reduction.
Absolutely.
And that is, whether real or not, and I do not believe it to be real, and that is the depletion of energy, oil, food, and water.
Yes, absolutely. And it's interesting because that whole situation, if it is in fact real, which there's a great body of evidence to suggest that it is not, but if we are in fact witnessing energy scarcities all along the board, I fail to see where the measures employed by the elite will solve the problem, because it was in fact the scientific doctrine of the elite that would have caused the problems to begin with. Scientists have, for the majority of the 20th century and the latter half of the 19th century, labored under the paradigm of materialism, and as you know, materialism basically precludes anything that does not basically constitute matter. It emphasizes the primacy of matter, and other scientists who have been investigating alternative forms of energy have been examining things outside this materialist paradigm and been discovering, brand new advances that could possibly lead to brand new, more cleaner and effective forms of energy. But because the dominant paradigm has been materialism, which again was promulgated by the elite, they haven't been able to really pursue it. Their research, is marginalized. They're marginalized. It's a problem that leads back to the ruling classes doctrine. And so for them to now suddenly suggest, measures by which to correct it is paradoxical, to say the least.
Well, I don't think it's a stretch to say in the future, and we're seeing it now with this recent GPS tracking of drivers in the Northwest, not to tax them at the pump, but to tax them by the miles they drive. And there's a control element there. I mean, you take a look now at airlines with retinal scans, and there's another control element there. It's always been told to me, and this is supposedly part of the whole communist situation back in China, especially when Mao took over, and that is to try to restrict travel as much as possible. But going on anyway, it's this idea of taxing for usage, so that if you eat too much or you do too much of this, it's all going to be taxed as a penalty for not being a good citizen.
Absolutely. It's like what Ayn Rand presented in Atlas Shrugged. Eventually, the more abundant the rules, the more corrupt the land becomes, because it becomes impossible for the average citizen,
right,
to live his or her life without breaking some rule.
Right.
And so eventually you have the criminalization of the entire population, and of course, a nation of criminals denotes a nation that is a prison, and that's essentially what you have had happen in China and in communist Russia and Germany, Nazi Germany, was the citizenry became prisoners within their own prison.
Yeah, and it's funny because Judge Brandeis had said that the most precious right an American has is the right to be left alone.
Absolutely.
And I keep telling people, think about that, because I also think about that line from Cool Hand Luke.
Oh, yeah.
Paul Newman says, "Why don't you stop being so good to me?"
Absolutely.
And that's it. It's like, leave me alone.
Exactly. Even if your motives are altruistic, who would know better, for myself than myself? Who would know better what is right for me than myself alone? Because for a government, first off, anytime you want to screw something up, anytime you really want to screw something up, you just get a committee to work on it. And everything. Well, now imagine, dozens and dozens of committees and everything. All of a sudden, I mean, you think you got problems now and everything. I mean, to put a spin on I think it was the old mantra, no taxation without representation. It was pretty bad, then. That's why the original founding fathers revolted. But now we have taxation with representation. So I mean,
it's worse.
Yeah, it's gotten a lot worse.
If you don't mind, since we're looking at about maybe 10 minutes more,
sure.
Instead of touching upon Cecil Rhodes, which is a fascination of mine, and the United Nations and such, turning back to the scientific dictatorship and the world yet to come, I guess I had exchanged emails with Paul about what kind of caste system or what kind of alpha and betas or whatever await us, and I had written to him that a listener said that there'll be genetic modification not only for the purity and the long-lastingness of the elite class, but to have a certain worker class that would need less in terms of food, water, and needs. And I just want to say one more thing, and I'm going to throw it to you, that I had read a transcript between a Dr. Daigle and Butch Paul, who's on the Genesis Communication Network, and he was talking about what has already been worked on is the creation of a cyborg class.
That's a very interesting observation. Today we have the transhumanist movement, which of course boasts such luminaries as sociologist William Sims Bainbridge, and has been closely affiliated with government-sponsored research into convergent technology, cybernetics, nanotechnology, what have you. And one of their ideologues, Princeton University professor Lee Silver, basically predicted that the future would witness the rise of what he calls the gen-rich class, or a genetically rich class. And meanwhile, there would be an underclass known as the natural class. But this is what he said, and I'm quoting now, quote,
all aspects of the economy, the media, the entertainment industry, and the knowledge industry will be controlled by members of the gin-rich class. Naturals will work as low-paid service providers or as laborers, unquote. Now, that's as long as the naturals serve a purpose in the world. But according to Darwinian doctrine, which to a certain extent underpins the doctrine of transhumanism, extinctions basically are an integral part of evolution, and the transhumanist movement has already pretty much predicted a coming extinction, and that extinction will be the extinction of the naturals. Dr. Richard Lynn, the emeritus professor at University of Ulster, basically, and another transhumanist ideologue said, and I'm quoting him now, "What is called for here is not genocide, the killing off of the population of incompetent cultures, but we do need to think realistically in terms of phasing out such peoples. Evolutionary progress means the extinction of the less competent," unquote. And that basically includes the vast majority that constitute naturals that do not fall within the orbit of the gin-rich class.
Well, another element of this worker class, or you want to call them Morlocks or whatever.
Sure.
And I think Huxley was advancing this, that either through drugs or now in this technocratic age, the use of virtual reality,
absolutely,
or unreality, to make everyone's existence seem a little bit better, since for the most part the grunts are always going to be wearing gray pajamas.
That's right. It's very interesting that you bring up drugs too, because William Sims Bainbridge himself said, and I'm quoting now. Sorry for all the quotes, but these are just damning quotes. He said, quote, "Techniques such as genetic engineering, psychoactive drugs, and electronic control of the brain make possible a transformation of the species into docile, fully obedient, safe organisms," unquote. Well, right there, I mean, pretty much encapsulates the thoroughly synopsizes the agenda, which will be, the progressive anesthetization of the natural class, which you and I, naturally constitute, on their way towards the eventual slaughter, eventual phasing out, as it was stated earlier.
Well, now I think back to what I thought were two innocuous shows, and they may have been at that time. But what was it, The Bionic Man and Woman?
Yes.
With Lee Majors?
Yeah, Lee Majors, yeah.
And now I'm saying, again, here's a situation, quite possibly, where the writers of that show I think they were probably privy to the plan, or they were shown that it was possible. Again, this marriage between supposed science fiction and the reality. And
absolutely.
People.
Sure. And it's very interesting that you bring that up. There's a role-playing game on the market. Role-playing games are basically a form of psychodrama where people who play them put on mask, essentially, and in their own mind become the characters that they play. And while this seems innocuous enough, like D&D, Dungeons & Dragons, right, and what have you, the providence of nerds and geeks and what have you, it blurs the lines between fantasy and reality. And to give you an excellent example of that, one of the role-playing games that's on the market is called Cyberpunk. And I knew a avid player of the game, and he told me that he would have no problem with cybernetic augmentation of his body. He thought it was cool. And not that I have a problem with cybernetic augmentation if it could, solve problems like blindness or being crippled.
Right.
But when we're talking about, grafting stuff on, like, machine guns and what have you, and stuff that really has no further application than dubious motives, would suggest. Now we're talking a whole other different thing.
Yeah, and another thing that struck me was that I had a discussion with Harry, and Harry has a number of student workers. One of them is very astute, computer-wise and elsewhere. And we were talking about virtual realities and Huxley, and he kind of tipped us off, or rather made us think about how you could experience anything that you wanted.
Absolutely.
With the technology that's out there now and will be improved, so that actually your life outside your life would probably be more gratifying.
That's right. It's interesting that you brought that up, because there was an episode of Married with Children where the one character, Bud Bundy, goes into virtual reality goggles, and comes across the woman of his dreams, and he says something to the effect that, with a woman like you in here, why would I ever want to go back there?
A little conditioning element from boxing.
Yep. Again, you have intimations of this electronic psychocognitive hive, and the further removal of humanity from reality itself.
We'll leave on this note, but and pick up hopefully in another segment.
Sure.
Now, when we look at the magic that's always been out there, for centuries ago and even now, it does really incorporate both technology and pharmacos.
That's right.
And now we're going to see the melding of both to build the, quote, perfect life for all the lumpins, aren't we?
That's right. And it's interesting that you bring that up, because pharmakos is derived from the original Hebrew word pharmakia, which meant sorcery.
That's right.
And technology is derived from the Greek root techne, which basically means craft, and has been associated with the word Wicca, which means basically that's derived from the word wicker, which means to bend, as in the bending of reality. So again, it's like what you said. It's this magical subcurrent in the dominant state of affairs.